Hello, New Wave of British Heavy Metal.com here. Today it's the 29th of January 2022. Before we get into it, as usual, if I can make the opening request for a favour, and that's if you would please subscribe to the channel. That would be excellent. I'd appreciate that if you would. Right, today, a bit more prog rock. Been listening to quite a bit of prog recently and enjoying it, and stumbled on this one, which is Jack Lancaster and Robin Lumley's take on the old classic Peter and the Wolf symphony, which of course was written by Sergei Prokofiev, if I've pronounced that right, all the way back in the 1930s. And this album came out in 1975 I think it was, and it's Jack Lancaster and Robin Lumley's take on it. Concept album based around the Peter and the Wolf. It was intended as a soundtrack for a film, but the film never materialised. So Jack and Robin issued the album anyway because they'd recorded it. So even there's no film, we've still got the soundtrack. And it's a really excellent, like classic mid-1970s prog rock. Really excellent stuff. And what they've done, you know, the packaging is great, the artwork is excellent, the booklet full of great illustrations and whatnot. You know, again, this is why we have physical products still, isn't it? You don't get this with a download or a stream or whatever. And anyway, I'm starting to ramble, aren't I? But back to the history a little bit. Jack Lancaster, for those of you that have long memories, probably with a greater recall than I, Jack Lancaster, of course, back in the late 60s formed Bloodwind Pig, and he and Robin Lumley, sorry, Peter Lumley, did, God, I'm getting all my names mixed up, aren't I? Jack Lancaster, Robin Lumley, Peter and the Wolf, there, got it right. So Jack Lancaster, Bloodwind Pig, he and Robin Lumley collaborated on a few things, including this, and they put together quite a troupe of musicians to play on here. I mean, just to name a few of them, we've got Gary Moore, Alvin Lee, Chris Spedding, Gary Brooker, Bill Bruford, Cozy Powell, John Hiseman. That's just naming a few. Can't get through them all, or be here for hours. They even managed to get classical violinist Stephane Grappelli to contribute, would you believe? And the narration is done in fine style by the wonderfully eccentric Viv Stanshall. If anyone remembers Viv, you know, what a guy. Sir Henry at Rawlinson End, he worked with Bob Calvert on Captain Lockheed and Starfighters and all sorts of other stuff. So all those musicians, what a troupe, right? And musically, we've got 21 short tracks here. The sequence is a bit of brief narration from Viv Stanshall, followed by a short burst of music meant to sort of like continue that narration in musical form and represent the story unfolding. Now, you've got to bear in mind when listening to this that it was intended as a soundtrack, so short bursts of music and a bit of narration are appropriate to that, but as a listening, to sit down and listen to it, it can sound a little bit disjointed because of that. So you do have to remember it's intended as a soundtrack rather than a cohesive album, if that makes sense. And each piece of music represents a character or sequence in the story. For example, you know, we've got Peter, Duck, Cat, Grandfather, Wolf, and so on. And whilst it's a little bit eccentric, I suppose, it's all so well done in that typical mid-1970s prog rock, slightly overgrown style, but the musicianship is excellent, as is Stanshall's narration. Given the nature of it, there's only one track here that I suppose could be deemed a proper song, and that's called Rock and Roll Celebration, which is a punchy, short, snappy rocker. Sounds a bit like Status Quo, but the rest of it, with it being just short bursts of music and whatnot, do feel that you're wanting a little bit more sometimes, but it's still an enjoyable listen. Now, I grew up musically, at least, in the 1970s, listening to lashings and new wave of British heavy metal, and also probably equal measures of prog, and that's why I still love all this stuff to this day. and stumbling on this reissue has been a real pleasure. And if you're like me, still stuck in the 70s, you'll enjoy this if you like your prog rock as well, because they just don't make them like this anymore. And that's why it makes it even better that stuff like this still sees the light of day, like 40 odd years later. And I would recommend, if you decide to get this, that you get the CD version because of the packaging and the booklet and the illustrations and all the rest of it. But if you prefer all this newfangled MP3 streaming thing and whatnot, it's available in those formats as well. I will drop a link in the description box underneath the video to the album on Amazon, so you can go and get whichever version you do fancy. And say get yourself a great slab of mid-1970s progressive rock concept albums, because they just don't do them like this anymore. Right, that's it. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That would be marvellous. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and take care.